Well, hello, friends, and welcome to Boston.com's Cocktail Club. I'm Jackson Cannon, and soon I'll be joined by Brian Hoefling, author of the Cocktail Seminars. Tonight, we're revisiting two disco-era drinks, catching up on the restaurant and bar community, and of course, sharing tips the pros use to make great drinks at home. I'm going to go through everything we need for tonight, and all the while, we're taking your questions from the chat. From the shopping list, you would have seen Blanco tequila. That's the key ingredient in a precursor to the Tequila Sunrise we all know, that uses fresh lime juice, which you'll also need, cassis, or another sweetener like a grenadine or a creme de mure or something like that, with soda water to top that off. And for the revisitation to the Amaretto Sour, or what's sometimes called the Morgenthaler Sour, Brian's going to lead us with Amaretto, a touch of cask strength bourbon. You'll need fresh lemon juice for that, some simple syrup, and don't skip the egg white or the Angostura bitters. For both of these drinks, you can sometimes use a little maraschino cherry or a slice of orange as part of the garnish as well. Those are optional. For ice, we'll just use regular cubed ice for shaking, you know, the little 1x1s that we like to get out of our Target ice molds. We'll use a tall glass for our Tequila Sunrise. Get that sunrise effect by having most of the drink below topped with soda instead of a float of the sweet part. And then a big double old fashioned or fancy rocks glass is how I'm going to have that sour. If you have a pretty up glass that you like to sip cocktails like that, you can do it that way as well. You'll need something to shake your drink. I'm going to use mixing tins myself, but if you don't have access to these and you want something with a good seal, a mason jar with a lid can do the trick, or even a quart container from, you know, some takeout soup or something like that. As long as the seal's good, you can toss the drink around pretty well in there. I'm going to strain through a Hawthorne strainer into my drinks, and then of course you'll need to measure. I'll use these jiggers like we use in a bar room, 2 ounces over 1, 3/4 over a half. Those give us lots of splits when you use the lines in between for building lots of cocktails quickly. So we're just doing one thing at a time. Very accurate tool that everybody seems to have is a tablespoon. Remember, a tablespoon is half an ounce. So Brian and I will mostly be talking in ounces, but if we say 1.5 ounces, well, that's 3 tablespoons, okay? Cutting board and a knife always comes in handy. I like to use tongs when I'm moving stuff around. But that's about all you'll need to make these drinks tonight. So my friend Brian Hoefling is a Cambridge-based writer and a cocktail educator. His interest in classic drinks began in college and blossomed when several of his friends approached him to ask for his help in, as they put it, learning to drink like adults before they graduated. To meet this need, he developed a pseudo-academic cocktail class, which would cover 30 major recipes over the course of a dozen weekly sessions. That experience hooked him on cocktails for good and led to the creation of the Herzog Cocktail School. He's done classes virtually and in person of all sizes and given lectures at Thirst Boston and San Antonio Cocktail Conference, among other prestigious institutions. His book, The Cocktail Seminars, available on Abbeville Press, is an extension of his first semester-long cocktail class and gives the home bartender a comprehensive grounding in the art and tradition of cocktails. I would submit this is a great book for pros to pick up as well. I'm having a blast looking through it. Instead of tips for himself, he's asked that you please see the In the Weeds Venmo link for donations to support our industry. We really appreciate that, Brian. We appreciate you being here. Welcome to Cocktail Club, brother.
It's a pleasure to be here, Jackson. Thanks for having me.
I love your setup. Very studious for the drink maker, drinks author.
Thank you. Yeah, the number of books in this room has multiplied over the course of the time I've lived here. And
as a way to do that, you know, one of the things one of the things in your book, which I'll show right now, and we're going to drop the link for people to pick this up if they're interested in the chat. But one of the things I noticed, you reference a lot of other books in here. You know, whenever there's and so that could be kind of it's a great list of all the basic classics and some beyond that. It's organized really well. You can kind of go progressively through it, or you can pick and hunt like I've been doing. But in it, I've heard mention of a couple of books I hadn't heard of before. So it's not only increased my collection by one, if you know what I mean.
I'm always happy to help out our local booksellers one way or another.
Well, what was the experience like of getting this to final fruition from the original classes? Did you know you wanted to do this for a while, or?
I mean, that first class that I did, which was fundamentally it was a lark. They asked me for some help, and I think that probably could have been satisfied with come over one time and we'll just talk about some cocktails. But I took it really just unnecessarily far. And I had such a good time doing it that I have been trying to figure out a way to do something like it really ever since. And so for years, I was refining the syllabus for this class that I had taught once as a college senior and had no realistic avenues of teaching in a similar format again. And eventually I started thinking, okay, well, if this is the 100 level version of the class, what's sort of the 200 level and 300 level? If we tried to imagine, an undergraduate curriculum in cocktails, what's the kind of in major track, the required course sequence you've got to get? And this book, I'm very grateful to Abbeville because they've given me the opportunity to write something that I have been really wanting to write for a number of years, and to give it a much more developed form than I ever expected that I would get to.
Well, that's exciting. Hey, how are the locals in your area for great cocktails doing? What's your kind of favorite go-to these days?
I've been loving the ability to kind of get back out again and go to bars. I live near Harvard Square. We spent actually quite a lot of time with the places that we can walk to. I think there's still a certain amount of, let's hit our own neighborhood before we go further afield. A lot of appreciation lately, honestly, to Grendel's Den in Harvard Square, which is a remarkable cross-section of people in a place where you can go and get just a very, very sort of straightforward, unpretentious beer night, but also have an excellent Naked and Famous or some other cocktail with mezcal and chartreuse and everything else on the menu.
God, I could not agree with you more. That place is such a unself-conscious expression of how a bar can be a melting pot. It's just such a great vibe.
Yeah. Here. We were there the other night.
Right on. Well, you might have noticed in your biography, I artfully skipped your alma mater, but everybody can see that though you're living in Cambridge Square, you are a proud alum of another fine institution. But we'll just kind of leave that there in case anybody else wants to ask some more questions. I wanted to answer one question from the chat that we got. Rebecca, when she signed in, she considered herself a mild-mannered gal, not necessarily a mixologist per se, and she wants to get a small repertoire of easy beverages. I'm going to say I've already recommended your book, and I really think it's a great foundational book for the home bartender. But she's asking, are there any others that she should get? So do you have another favorite?
Yeah, I would say if you're looking for a repertoire of easy beverages outside of anything that I might have written, my first question is, are you local to the Boston area? Because if that's the case, I've got to particularly recommend Fred Yarm's books, Drink and Tell and Drunk and Told, which are both really, if you're not familiar, if you're watching, they're both really excellent compilations of recipes developed at bars around Boston in the modern period. There's a lot of really, really excellent stuff in there, and Fred's approach to writing a cocktail book is very much oriented towards ingredients that are reusable. There's not a lot of, you must make this chai infused vermouth that you're only going to use 3/4 of an ounce of in one cocktail. So you better hope you're making that one a lot. So I think if you're looking to explore and experiment a little bit, that's either of his books is a really good option. The second one, it contains an index to both of them. So if you're only going to get one, maybe start with number 2. But the other one that comes to mind is the Pvc Cocktail Book by Jim Meehan, which is one that I have often found myself reaching for as a contemporary cocktail guide that is, very much recipe oriented. A lot of bars have put out books which I very much enjoyed, but they're so much about the bar, about how to run a bar, and that's very valuable stuff. This is I think a much more streamlined option for someone who's tending bar at home.
Well, they set out to do what the Savoy's book did for the bar 2 generations before, and they really accomplished it. And Fred's thing, I couldn't agree with you more, man. He documented something so special that was happening, and we didn't even all know it was happening I'm not the only bartender in there who's gone back and been like, I don't remember that. And if it wasn't for Fred, we'd have lost more important examples of drinks than the ones of mine that are in there. That's for sure. Hey, should we make a cocktail? Sip
Let's
on
make a
one?
cocktail.
All right. So this is a fun one. I know it's a little bit of clickbait to have teased you all in here with disco drinks revisited. This drink bears no resemblance to the drink that comes after it with the same name, the Tequila Sunrise. That drink was invented in the early 70s, popularized in a way that's been well documented. But this drink has a little bit murkier origin story, probably definitely comes either from Mexico or Arizona, and comes to us either from 30s or 40s. And it's a fun, light, quaffable, instantly recognizable as a classic. And when I had it, reminded me so much of the Diablo, but we'll get into that later. So we're going to make the original Tequila Sunrise with Blanco tequila, lime juice, and cassis. I'm going to use, I got this mini bottle of Blanco. We're going to start with 1.5 ounces or 3 tablespoons of tequila. A lot of questions about tequila brands, Brian. What one are you using for this one?
I am using a tequila called Rejon. This is actually not available in the United States, not to brag, but I used to work for a distributor that focused on kind of small independent producers, and this was a product that we were trying to bring up from Mexico. And this is a leftover sample bottle. We were unfortunately unsuccessful at getting it into this market.
Well, that was a wonderful part of your career that I didn't expose people to yet, but that's your love of drinks and of the great ingredients that goes into them led you to do some interesting work as an importer. That has been cut a little bit short by COVID. It's kind of tough. Is that something you think you might get back to?
I mean, I was honestly talking about this with somebody earlier today. I really loved the work that I was doing. That kind of lifestyle I think worked very well for me, and I don't just mean the part where you spend a lot of time in bars. You know, I liked getting to use our portfolio to solve problems that people had, fill holes in somebody's bar program or their liquor store shelf space. And
while you're answering that, let's just do our 3/4 ounce of cassis.
Oh yeah, sure.
Or grenadine if you don't have cassis is an interesting substitute, or like a creme de mure, just something sweet and dark is appropriate. Well, I love that part of your service, you know, not as a working bartender, but with all sense of hospitality is how you kind of approach that part of our work, which is so critical. Otherwise, we'll have 5 ingredients to make drinks from if it were not for those labors of yours. I saw you doing fresh juice there. I did mine ahead of time, but you juiced a couple of limes while we were chatting.
Yes, I did. Although I think yours was a wise choice. It seems that people like the taste of lime juice that's been, you know, allowed to breathe a little bit in many cases more than.
It is so interesting to me that we finally got all the way there, you know, from trial and error of juicing limes to order, you know, from using terrible commercial versions, obviously juicing to orders better, then juicing a lot for prep, then realizing, wow, it softens just a little bit in that hour.
Mm-hmm.
I think another thing that happens in bars that it's very hard for us to see the effects of at home unless we're entertaining, is that, you know, the limes are all a little bit different. So if you have, you know, there is like one perfect lime, and then there's the one next to it's a little bit drier, and the other one's a little bit more bitter. And when you juice a case of them, you equalize that. And there's no real way to kind of do that for our thing. But it does keep for a day in the fridge. So, you know, if you're thinking you might have, I've actually gotten away with it lasting a little longer. It just depends, you know. So I'm not saying use old lime juice. I'm just saying, you know, trust your senses. All right. So what do we got? We got 3 things in the cup. That's enough for us to get started. I'm going to put the ice right into my tall glass, and then I'm going to put the ice in my shaker, and we can shake that up. I know the post 70s version of this drink has you kind of marbling in the grenadine. We're going to get the sunrise effect a slightly different way. So we are going to shake all three of these things up pretty vigorously until they're well mixed, and then strain them out.
I'm with you.
So answering the question, soda water or seltzer, those are in some senses different, in some senses synonyms. You know, club soda, soda water, seltzer. Brian has charged the his home device, so you just want to have carbonated water. I like to use a brand that also doesn't have a lot of other ingredients in it as a kind of preservative. Although those have great flavor, I just try to keep it as clean as I can. So you can see with this cassis shaken with the tequila and lime, we are in that spectrum of what we might think a beautiful late summer, low latitude setting sun might look like. And I'm gonna kind of carefully top with the soda. I'm not trying to get it all the way mixed. I just kind of want this up at the top. And you can see that there's enough of a fade that, you know, you could see how they made, tell what it is. Now, on this drink, the way that it's prepared, a little lighter on the citrus, I like a little tiny bit more lime. So I'm actually gonna do, go kind of off reservation, just cut a little tiny lime wheel for the back of this. And the reason, you know, I'm gonna sip this drink with the soda on top. I'm gonna let that full kind of tequila, citrus, and cassis be my first sip through the straw. And then as it goes down, it's gonna lighten up, and towards the end, it's gonna get that pop of even more fresh citrus. How you doing over there?
Well, filled mine a little tall, but I think I do have the visual.
Hey, look at you.
Well,
Yeah, you sure do. All right, cheers, my friend.
Cheers. That's extremely pleasant.
No, it's just so interesting to me that there's really spice from the Blanco that kind of comes through this, you know. And do you know the El Diablo?
Yeah, I mean it's.
I mean the way we made it was this drink plus augured ginger juice. But I think it's described some other places as this topped with either ginger ale or ginger beer.
Yeah.
But I actually think this drink's already in that realm. It's not as hot and spicy as when you blend the cassis and lime and ginger.
No, but you can sort of feel where the ginger would go.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. No, it's like you can imagine where cumin comes after black pepper,
Mhm.
right? This has the pepper, but not the, you know, not that other note. But wow.
It's the unresolved tonic in a way.
Well, I could see sipping that in the scorching sun at poolside, either at the Arizona Biltmore or at the Agua Caliente racetrack, and you know, just over the border in Tijuana, either in the 30s or 40s or 50s, whenever it came. Now, it's interesting to me, like, I don't know how much we should talk about the other tequila sunrise being orange juice and grenadine and tequila, but there's really just not a lot you can do to get into kind of this level of like kind of craft balance that we come to expect. So, although Gina Gavritzi and just so many people have done like interesting departures. Todd Thrasher did a really cool kind of like play on it, and they all sort of hid. He used like blue curacao in his. They all like hid what they were doing, and I just felt like they were laboring under an intense barrier in, as Mian would put it, like using the worst cocktail ingredient there is, orange juice. A great ingredient for breakfast, you know, but not really versatile and flexible, and not willing to like give and get any ground like, you know, the other citruses do. So I think I'm sold on this. I don't know how well I'm gonna be able to sell it because of people's expectations, but I'm gonna be willing to find out, I think.
Now I'm sold on the cocktail, although I'm not sure I can let you cast such aspersions on orange juice. All right. It's definitely the case that a lot of very bad drinks are made, or a lot of very unbalanced drinks get made with orange juice, usually because they use a whole bunch of orange juice.
Well, yeah, that's kind of, it's just, there's just no room to move that when you use it like it's the soda water, you know.
And
But in the
essentially,
Bronx, in the Bronx, it's fascinating to me, and in the Ward 8, it's really just like the best Ward 8s are using lemon to actually do the lifting, and orange is just kind of there playing around, you know.
it's an aromatic accent. Yeah.
Yeah.
I used to
Well,
have the Chad Arnholt version of the Ward 8, the high grenadine, low orange, high proof rye base, printed on my business cards, because I'd be like, no, trust me, guys, it's a good drink here. Just like take it, try it.
that's a really good, that's a really good drink that I never felt like I quite understood, you know, like I just, I don't know. I'm willing to flaunt dogma, but on that drink, I was like, wait a minute, I'm confused. Um, do you still know it, you know it by heart then? You know that recipe by heart then, right?
Absolutely. 1.75 ounces of 100 proof rye whiskey. He used Rittenhouse is actually a product that I used to sell that I thought was even better for it, called Red Saw Rye. So 1.75 ounces of 100-ish proof rye, 3/4 of an ounce lemon, 3/4 of an ounce of grenadine, half an ounce of lemon, half an ounce of orange juice. Fresh squeezed orange juice is definitely helpful rather than bottled, although it's not as necessary as fresh squeezed lemon juice versus bottled.
Well said. Hey, speaking of high proof whiskey and aromatic notes, um, there's a lot to get through, on a lot to unpack on this Amaretto Sour. So please get started
Yes.
talking about this one.
Yeah, I wonder where you could be going with this. All right, yeah, let's talk Amaretto Sour. I'm gonna go ahead and juice my lemon here while I'm getting started, because I have not done that yet, and I don't want to have to do it in the midst of trying to talk about the proportions. So yeah, what do you think, Jackson? You want me to talk a little bit about the context of the drink first, or just we'll go right into the recipe? How thirsty are you?
Yeah, give us a little context. Give us a minute, and then because we also still have a lot of ingredients to mount. So
Yeah, you got it. So this Amaretto Sour is based on a recipe from a guy named Jeffrey Morgenthaler from Portland. That's the West Coast Portland, not the original East Coast Portland. And he tells people that he makes the best Amaretto Sour in the world. He's absolutely right. What I like about this recipe is that it's not doing what you described a lot of people who try to fix the Tequila Sunrise, the 70s Tequila Sunrise do, and make sort of a whole different thing, still doesn't quite work. It's very much an Amaretto Sour. The Amaretto is still very much the principal ingredient that we're kind of arranging everything else around to modify and enhance. But it is just leagues better than I think what a lot of us think of when we think of an Amaretto Sour, that sort of, nightclub kind of, it's Amaretto and, bright yellow sour mix, made of, let's not talk about what. There's a vast gulf between that and this, but it is still recognizably an Amaretto.
well, it's funny. That's a whiskey sour was that bad when you used the mix, right? And then as craft tenders and enthusiasts, right, we moved forward and fixed up our whiskey sours. And then it still took another like 5 years to think, well, wait a minute, maybe that Amaretto Sour was a good drink. We just, we held it in some disdain because of the period it was, that we knew it from, the period it was ruined in, but turns out it's a classic that's delicious in its own right. But this is the best one. And I would like to say, for the record, anyone can make the best Amaretto Sour in the world because Jeffrey's shown us his recipe. And many more times than not, this is the one you'll get these days if you're at a craft style bar. But let's start with how do you like to build yours?
Well, I don't work in a bar, so I often build from the base spirit out rather than in like increasing order of price. Although I suppose you did the same thing tonight. So
I usually do that. The one thing I'm going to do different is because it's easy to screw up the egg white, and I'm using egg white, I'm going to put my egg white in first. So, I mean, this is a moment for everyone to egg white or not to egg white. I'm a huge fan. Do you have a dissenting position on that, Brian?
Oh no, I am very strongly pro egg white. In cocktails, just like in general, I'm a fan of egg whites whenever egg whites are available. I'm also a fan of egg yolks, both in cocktails and whenever available.
I'm actually gonna save my egg yolk. Right down here, I
Oh,
saved a little bowl for that, so I don't have to throw it away.
now, what do you like to do with yours, Jackson?
My yolk,
Yeah.
I will eat it. Probably as a salad dressing
Okay.
or a little aioli. But it depends. If I only have one, I'll just put it in the fridge, cook it with the morning eggs, you know?
That's a good option. I think this has some carbonara in its future.
Nice.
That's often where they go in this house. And Jackson, I gotta say, it's a very good thing that you pointed out. Do the egg first, because that was a rather messy break, and I very nearly got a whole bunch of yolk and shell, but I didn't in the end. This would have been much more hair-raising if I had already had the liquid ingredients in.
Hey, just so you know, I bring two out because I made it through the first few harrowing times of using one egg, and then in another episode, I dropped one right on the floor. So it happens, you know.
I mean, I too came prepared.
Love it.
I gotta tell you, I did a virtual class earlier this summer for an organization, and I had the absolute worst luck that I had ever had in any class, virtual or in person. So many things went wrong, which culminated with, it was a very, very hot day, and I was demonstrating a sparkling wine cocktail, and I had just gotten the basket off the cork, and I took my hand off for a moment, which I should not have done. Do not do that. But it just popped, right? And exploded all over me. And I just sort of stopped and looked into the camera. It's like, I don't even know what to tell you guys at this point. This is not my day. So
That's fantastic. And answering one question from the chat, and then we'll get into the ingredients. Does the temperature of the egg white matter? Does it can be cold or room temperature? Eggs are really funny. We keep them in cold storage in this country for a couple of reasons, but the shell itself is some protection for the eggs. So a lot of times we can sit them out and they come up to room temperature. I have tested drinks back and forth, and it's very hard to see the difference of that room temperature egg white versus a cold egg white, when in fact everything that goes on it does get shaken on ice usually at some point. So there's a very, very, very small difference if your egg is egg white is super cold, but the amount of time that it's been sitting in the tin while we've been chatting is long enough for it to kind of temper its way and be ready to accept the ingredients. So.
Oh, absolutely. So I'm going to go ahead and put 1.5 ounces of the amaretto into my mixing tin, and I'm going to follow that with 3/4 ounce of the cask strength bourbon, which, once again, 1.5 tablespoons if those are the measurements you've got handy. If you don't have a 1/2 tablespoon measurement handy, like a tablespoon and a 1.5 teaspoons would also do it. You can eyeball the 1/2 teaspoon. It's gonna be good if you're off, by like 1/12 ounce in either direction. So that was 1.5 ounces of the amaretto, and now 3/4 ounce of the bourbon. This is another product that is not available in this state that I was trying to bring in.
People were asking what you're using there.
This is from a company called Spirits of French Lick. They are incredible. They are based in French Lick, Indiana, which basketball fans may recall as the origin of one Mr. Larry Bird. They make many incredible products and some really, really excellent whiskey that is shockingly reasonably priced. There is a reason I was trying to get them into the state, and I haven't entirely given up on that project, even though I would make no money on it at this point. I just want to be able to get it without having to go to Indiana. But so this is a cask strength expression. Their standard bourbon is not. It's a 4-grain bourbon, though, so there's oats in there, which is a kind of unusual choice that I think works very well. 3/4 ounce of the cask strength bourbon, full ounce of the lemon juice. Now, in the recipe that we put out, we said 1/4 ounce of 1-to-1 simple syrup, which I realized I had neglected to make at about the time this class was starting. So I'm using there's a lot of very close substitutions that I find you can use that put similar total amounts of sugar, like molecules of sugar into the drink. Roughly, if you're doing like a teaspoon of 2-to-1 syrup versus a quarter of an ounce of 1-to-1 syrup, that's going to be about the same. And sometimes in lieu of that teaspoon of 2-to-1, I will do a teaspoon of maple syrup, which is what I've got here. The flavor is actually not that different from like a Demerara rich simple syrup.
That's fun.
There are differences. It hits a lot of the same notes.
Brian, tell me the name of that whiskey from French Lick again. I'll type it into the chat for our friends.
The distillery is Spirits of French Lick, and their flagship whiskey is the Lee W. Sinclair. Which is not the one that I have here. But I suppose, there may be folks on the call who are from all kinds of places, including some states where these products are easier to get. I'm not actually certain what the name of this product would be, because this is a sort of distillery sample. I don't think they bottled this one yet when I got it. All right, so in our tin now, we've got the bourbon, the amaretto, the lemon juice, the sugar, syrup, maple syrup, whatever you're using, and also the egg white. So this is where, if I may say so myself, I think this gets really fun. What I've got here is a Hamilton Beach flash blender, milkshake mixer, drink mixer, spindle blender that's got lots of different kinds of names for this thing. Basically, I'm actually going to take the spindle out a little for a moment and see maybe we can get a better look at it on the screen. So as you can see, that's this sort of like hard plastic undulating disc. It's meant to agitate without kind of whipping or breaking down the way that a conventional blender does. These were very popular in some of the early tiki bars and in some of the modern tiki bars that are doing this thing with crushed ice. You want to mix it in and not pulverize it. You don't want to make it slush. It's actually also really useful for whipping an egg white drink. Morgenthaler uses an immersion blender when he makes his, which will do similar things in this case. So I'm going to do that because I love any excuse to use this thing, especially on egg whites. If you don't,
while Brian's doing that, I'm going to show you kind of the old dry shake method, where I'm going to vigorously shake this without any ice, and then I'm going to add ice when we get to the shaking stage.
Sounds good. You go ahead and talk through that. This is going to take 2 to 3 seconds. So
all right, yeah.
I can just
just doing a dry shake, which is a little harder to get a seal on. So you can see, you might be able to see if you got high 4K there, that I'm leaking a little tiny bit, but it's just enough to kind of get all those ingredients together, kind of smooth the egg white out, get everything unified into a liquid that still has the froth of the egg white going, but no longer has those little congealed spots. So he's going to do that a lot simpler, a lot cleaner, and a lot faster.
Well, hopefully cleaner. It does like to spit a little bit. But then, yeah, just in that length of time, I don't know how apparent I can make this on the camera without dumping it all over myself. But you see, no, not really. There's froth in there. There's a lot of froth in there. Take my word for it.
And these drinks, if you just drop ice and shake, you can kind of get there. You'll shake so long to get the same level that it's worth that moment to blend these ingredients together in whatever method you have before then shaking it on ice. And in fact, these mini filibusters that we've been engaged in are also helping this drink, because there's a bit of a setup factor post blending it, either by sort of whip shake or by using an immersion, where it continues to kind of like improve, in my opinion, but I just know the very best ones I've ever made, there's been that little pause, right? Like, are you? And now we're shaking on ice, Brian?
Yes, we are. See, I didn't have the tightest of seals there myself.
I love the nose off of this drink already.
right?
All that almond and that it's the nuttiness and the whiskey kind of tempering it.
Nuts and lemon and spice go very, very well together. So I'm straining this off into my coupe glass. And I think y'all can see the wonderful head of foam that is formed on that.
That is beautiful.
Ooh, and it tastes good too. And I'm gonna now decorate the top with a few drops of Angostura bitters, which that does have, you know, some. I say decorate; it does have some nice aesthetic qualities to it, but also we want to add just that little aromatic finishing note to this, and give it sort of a kind of olfactory interest as we sip it. Right, the egg white tends to mute some things, and it will do that most, at least as we perceive them through smell. It's going to do that most right on top, where a lot of the egg white is. So we are adding a complementary flavor, but we are also giving ourselves the opportunity to continue smelling a little bit extra rather than a little bit less. Jackson, you're cutting a garnish there? Orange whip?
Yeah, I'm gonna do a little orange cherry just for like the linkage back to those halcyon days of panicking in the disco. I love the cinnamon note that comes off of the Angostura. It looks great. I'm not gonna go full umbrella, but I am gonna give this kind of what was once this weird and well understood flag. I also went on the rocks, so that's kind of different. I would never do a garnish like this particular Kit Kat on an up drink, but I'm going to do sort of the Seder today. I'm having all of the things together in this cocktail. Cheers.
Cheers. Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, that's just amazing to me. The texture's incredible, but there's just satisfying flavor of the amaretto with that little bit of that nuttier, herbaceous kick that comes from the high proof whiskey, just pushing all these flavors. I don't even know how he even thought of this as an idea, but it is the Amaretto Sour improved. And guilty pleasures, I used to be able to play. Now I'm not guilty about any of these great drinks, whatever era they come from, but I used to win with the Amaretto Sour. People were like, ooh, but well, this is even better,
Well, it's, like so many restaurants have figured out that elevated comfort food is something that absolutely everybody enjoys. We love fancy macaroni and cheese, right? Like it's we want to be able to enjoy that as much as grown-ups as we did as kids.
There's two elements to that the craft cocktail revival, as you well know, is deeply involved in. One is just better cheese macaroni, better technique at cooking it. The other is, that addition of truffle or whatever it is, that luxurious thing that in this case, the move is, this high proof bourbon, like that's a level of curiosity and it kind of intelligence and ambition being brought to a drink that would be very easy for somebody who's taking drinks seriously to overlook. That's the Morgenthaler magic.
He's really, really good at that.
Well, Brian, I am a huge fan of your book. I'm telling you, I can't get enough. I said it before, I'll say it again. It's a wonderful, comprehensive book for beginners, but also, in my opinion, becoming, a very interesting book for professionals to revisit drinks through the lens that you've put on all of them. And I really appreciate it. I appreciate you taking the time to be here. And it's just been great to have a couple of drinks with you.
Well, thank you so much, Jackson. I gotta say, it's really gratifying, especially coming from you, to hear that kind of praise for the book. I'm proud of it, and I'm glad that you are enjoying it. I hope others are too. And it's been absolutely delightful to be here.
Well, it's been great. We got to have you back. That's all the time we have for Cocktail Club this week. Make sure to follow Globe Events on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter for more information about upcoming Boston.com Cocktail Club events. You can find me on all those platforms as well by searching for @CannonJax. Bye, everybody. Thank you so much. Bye, Brian.
Bye, Jackson. Bye, folks. Cheers.